Welcome to B2B Bytes. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Isiah Bollinger, CEO and co-founder of Trellis, a leading e-commerce solutions provider. Isiah is a B2B household name. He runs arguably one of the most popular B2B e-commerce podcasts in the world. Isiah, welcome to B2B Bytes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that is obviously near and dear to my heart. It is e-commerce platform selection and how B2B businesses should be approaching that very difficult task of choosing a new e-commerce provider. Something that Isiah does all day, every day with lots of B2B businesses. So Isiah, where do we even start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hate to give like the generic answer, but I do think a good place to start is looking at some of the, I call it like big box reports, like the Gartner reports, like big box retailer reports, like the Magic Quadrant for commerce platforms. I think it's IDC. You guys were recently up there. Yeah, Forrester. And the reason I think these are important is because e-commerce platform selection, I think, is so important that it's highly unlikely you're going to want to go with some player that can't make one of these reports. There are actually quite a few platforms that are not on these reports, and they're not on these reports generally because they don't meet the criteria in terms of revenue or various, selection criteria. I think you know what I'm getting at, right? And so that's usually a place I would start, just because it'll give you a sense of the major vendors in the space. And then I would go about and just start having conversations with people maybe in your industry, trying to look at what are other, competitors using. That's not always a good. Sometimes they might be lagging behind, but sometimes they may be ahead of the game, and they might give you some insight into what other people are using. But I would start by just having a lot of conversations with. I think people underestimate that if you just go out and try and find experts like myself, like we'll give you free information, and there's a lot of people out there willing to just educate you for free because, for us, we see it as kind of, it'll come back to us over time as they see us as a trusted advisor in the future. Maybe they don't buy from me now, but maybe they'll buy from me in the future, right? And so I think, getting educated on those reports is a good first step. And then the second step is just having a lot of kind of conversations with different people to kind of maybe narrow in on the selection a little bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Start with those that are already respected within the industry. So if I'm going to use my example from our other B2B Byte session. I'm an HVAC distributor. I'm not online today, and I'm thinking about moving on to e-commerce. What should be part of my assessment criteria when addressing or when considering platforms? What should I assess those platforms on?
Well, I think there's before you even, let's take a step back because I want to address a little bit more. I definitely would say, like, if you're B2B versus B2B, B2C, or if you have a heavy B2B component, your selection process is going to be a lot more complicated and probably more rigorous. Whereas if you're just B2C, I think the selection process is probably going to be much, much simpler. And you may only be looking at a handful of platforms that most likely meet your needs. B2B, I think the selection process gets much more complicated. So that's a first place to start. Are you B2B, B2C, or maybe both? But I think if you have a B2B component, most likely that's going to be the driver of the selection, because the platform that can do those B2B features can probably also do the B2C features, if that makes sense.
B2B is a little bit more complex. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, exactly. And so most of the modern platforms like BigCommerce, you can use all the B2B functionality, but they've been doing B2C forever, so they have all that baked in, right? And so that's where the criteria is going to start. But then, I would start. Most companies just fail to do a basic requirements list. And I think that they assume things are going to work out of the box that don't work out of the box, or maybe are an app, or maybe unique to their business processes. So I would start by kind of documenting some of the basic requirements that you have, especially around things like ERP integration or kind of B2B specific processes in terms of how you do pricing, inventory, logistics, and kind of like, how does an order, theoretically, how will the order come to the website, and how can it get processed all the way to the end? And then how can they reorder? What things have to happen front to back for that to work?
I love that. Maybe let's just click on to what are some of the B2B specific complexities that businesses should consider that might be different from a B2C evaluation?
For sure. So definitely one of the most basics is just company accounts, or kind of what you would call a company accounts, where you have potentially different users that might be using the company. Now, Amazon has this. Like, everyone thinks of Amazon as B2B or a B2C, right? But Amazon's actually, I think, now the largest B2B distributor in the United States in terms of volume of B2B commerce sales. Like, we have a Trellis Amazon account, and then I can have sub users under that, and you can do that with BigCommerce. So usually, company accounts is a pretty common one. A request to quote. I know you guys acquired Quote Ninja, and quoting is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of what you have. Invoicing, and that invoice portal that you built, and kind of the ability to purchase with a purchase order, or kind of, I guess, traditionally offline methods or non-credit cards. Another common B2B problem is logistics, and you may have freight. Some of our B2B customers are really complicated because they have a mix of their own trucks and LTL freight options and potentially parcel. So you need to know, like, in real time, and buy online, pick up in store, will call. They might call it will call in B2B. So you need to know, like, does this product or this basket of goods, because it might not be one product, it might have 20 goods, it might have to get split cart. Maybe some of it could be shipped by their trucks, some of it is going to go LTL, and some of it is going to go by parcel, or maybe it's all just going to go in one thing, right? But you have, or maybe one thing gets picked up, right? So you have this massive complexity around logistics that's usually not so, like in B2C, it's usually, I'm getting some shirts shipped to my house. It's pretty simple,
That is one complex order, splitting it three ways: my trucks, UPS, and I'm coming and picking up from the warehouse. I love that. One of the questions we often get is how should I, as a business, plan for the future? I don't know how fast my business is going to grow, and I need to ensure that my e-commerce platform is going to keep up with my needs. How, specifically in B2B, how should businesses think about that, and how do they assess the capabilities
Yes.
of the platform?
I think that's arguably the hardest part, and something I take a lot of pride in, and why I've worked, so hard on being very strict with what partners that we accept and who we really focus our energy on. Not just because we have, obviously partners like you guys, but also we have like a lot of additional partners that are kind of like apps within the ecosystem, like a Yotpo or like a Celigo, that are maybe not the core e-commerce platform, but they're essential to the end result of maybe our customers. And so I think that's one of the hardest things to do, and especially when you're not an expert and like deep in the industry like we are. And it's easy to underestimate it's almost like investing is how I would argue, is how I would kind of analyze this. And you're making an investment in a platform in which you believe in not only their capabilities today, but then the next 3 to 5 years. So a good example is, there's aspects to I talked about the Gartner reports. There's aspects of those that I think are garbage. So, for instance, sometimes the leaders are these old legacy providers. So you have to be also a little bit careful with the. So, example would be Oracle. They bought ATG. I think they're not even on the list anymore. I think maybe it's IBM. They were a leader on the Magic Quadrant in 2019, I think, if you go back and look at the old Magic Quadrants. So in 2019, you're like, oh, it's a leader. I should, maybe I have Oracle ERP. I should select that. Now you're stuck on a dead platform. And so I think there's a couple things I look for. One is like, the size of their ecosystem, how big they are, their traction, their growth. A lot of that you can have through conversation. You see kind of the buzz around the platform. And then the other big one is their focus. So what I love about BigCommerce is very focused on commerce, e-commerce, digital commerce. You don't have an ERP system, a CRM. I'm not going to name some of these names, but as you can imagine, a lot of the other large e-commerce platforms are really only a tiny segment of those businesses, and might not even be able to operate on their own. Like, if they were split off, they might be failing businesses. And so you have to kind of look into the nuances and the details of these platforms and the trajectory of where they're going. And a lot of what we try and do is not only put our customers on something good now, but what we think will be there in 5-10 years, so that we can maintain them, or they're like, remember, those guys helped us build this business because they put us on the right platform for the future.
I love that. Yeah, it's important that you're not just buying an e-commerce platform for today. You're investing in where they're going, and that's part of the decision. And obviously, we're an e-commerce platform, and we hope that we're the right platform. But if we're not, then you may have needs and wants that aren't right for us, and you should pick a platform that is right for those needs and requirements, and that can help you grow. Isiah, this was incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.